You found just stories, simple, heartfelt moments from real lives, stories that remind us how connected we all are through love, loss, and hope. Get cozy. The stories are about to begin. The phone's ringtone, sounding closer to midday on a regular working Thursday, once again divided Eleanor's life into the happy period before and the almost hopeless period after. The screen displayed a familiar word: mother. Although calls in the middle of the day were infrequent, the woman didn't feel anything bad. What if? Maybe mother missed her or wanted advice on choosing clothes. Eleanor put a pencil mark on the margin of the draft contract sheet and hurried to answer so as not to keep her loved one waiting. As soon as she heard her mother's voice, which seemed unusually muffled, her heart sank somewhere down. It was clear that something sad had happened, and the assumption, unfortunately, was confirmed. Ella, hello. Just please don't worry too much. It turns out I'm in the hospital right now. Eleanor was alarmed. Mother, what happened? Which hospital are you in? What are the doctors saying? What do you need me to bring? What's the room number? The voice on the phone interrupted the flood of questions. Ella, I beg you, don't worry. It's just like in the movies. I slipped, fell, almost lost consciousness. But everything is fine. My neighbor Zena was passing by. She calmed me down and supported me while we waited for the ambulance. The doctor said everything will be fine, but I'll have to stay in the hospital for a short while. Mother, why didn't you tell me sooner? I would have rushed over, helped. I didn't want to bother you in the middle of your workday. But visiting hours are in the evening from 4 to 7, and if you go home from the office first, then to the pharmacy, I was afraid you might not make it. Anyway, please write down what you need to bring here. The main things are my insurance card and phone charger. Also water, non-carbonated, because for some reason I'm very thirsty. Invisible to Eleanor, her mother sighed, and the woman vividly imagined how her loved one's face was contorted with pain, and she hurried to end the conversation, clarifying the hospital and room number. Eleanor reread the list her mother had dictated, added chicken broth and wet wipes, and with shaky legs went to ask her boss for time off. Mr. Smith, may I please leave early today? I have a personal matter. My mother is in the hospital. The boss, a longtime friend of Eleanor's husband, expressed polite sympathy, and upon learning which clinic his subordinate's mother was in, encouraged her and inquired, The doctors at our local clinic are good. Maybe the facilities aren't too luxurious, but both the equipment and staff are excellent. I stayed there a couple of times and was discharged feeling like new. So everything will be fine, don't get down. By the way, are you driving today or is Andrew using the car? Maybe Peter the driver can give you a ride. Eleanor was touched by her boss's concern and decided she wasn't in a position to refuse. Thank you, Mr. Smith, that would be very helpful. I'll only keep the driver for a short time. I just need to stop by Mother's house and that's it. I won't keep Peter any longer. I'll pack things there and then call a taxi. Thank you. The manager wished Eleanor luck and promised, Come out to the main entrance in 15 minutes. I'll tell Peter to wait for you at your mother's house and drop you off at your and Andrew's family nest. He has to come back for me anyway, and your house is on the way. Thanking her considerate boss again, Eleanor went to turn off her computer and tidy up her workspace. She took the contract with her so as not to let the team down and to finish the work by the next morning. The woman barely registered the meaning of the stories the driver tried to entertain her with, but she was even grateful that the flow of his speech forced her to react somehow and prevented her from sinking into anxious thoughts. Following the list, ticking off each item, Ella packed things at her mother's apartment, watered her favorite flowers, turned off the gas and water just in case, checked the refrigerator, collected the trash to throw out, and only then went downstairs and continued on with the talkative Peter. Near Eleanor and Andrew's house was a supermarket with a pharmacy section, and the woman decided to stop there on the way. Asking Peter to stop by the trash bins, she threw out the bags and rushed in for groceries. Moving almost on autopilot, Ella bought everything she needed and was soon simultaneously preparing dinner for her husband and broth for her mother. While the food was cooking and baking, Eleanor called Andrew and explained the situation. Andy, Mother's in the hospital. I'm going to her. I don't know how long I'll be there. Dinner will be on the stove." The man admitted, "I know. Mr. Smith told me you needed support. Wait for me. I'll try to come home early and we'll go to the hospital together. You never know what might be needed, and this way I'll be there." Andrew didn't let his wife down and, picking her up along with the 2 bags she had packed, drove her to the hospital. Eleanor managed to persuade the nurse who was receiving deliveries to let her see her mother and the attending physician, who was fortunately present. Andrew waited for his wife in the lobby but sent warm regards and wishes for a speedy recovery. Ann Davis tried to smile when she saw Ella enter the room, but it was clear she was uncomfortable and scared. The woman quietly but clearly greeted everyone in the room and approached her mother's bed. A weight was suspended from the unfortunate woman's right leg. Her lips, bitten almost until they bled, clearly indicated that the victim of the ice had been in great pain. Eleanor listened to her mother's story about how she got into the predicament, and trying not to cry, began arranging everything she had brought in the bedside table. The phone was immediately put on charge. Ella gave her mother some broth and made her eat a few spoonfuls of raw grated carrots. They say online that a salad like this is the best vitamin remedy in the first few days after an injury. Then I'll give you some sour berry juice. That's good too. "Oh, daughter, don't worry. You should probably go. Andrew will come home. He'll probably be surprised you're not there." Ella explained that her husband knew what had happened, had rushed home so she wouldn't have to take a taxi, that he hadn't been allowed in, but he sent his regards. As if she had only been waiting for this remark, the woman in the neighboring bed became active. "The orderlies and nurses here are rude and boorish," she interjected into the conversation. "You can't get them day or night. They just drink tea and hang around the doctors. Giving them chocolates, even money, is useless. They still do their duties half-heartedly." Eleanor remained silent, and, after finding out her mother's doctor's full name, went to look for him. The restless neighbor didn't miss the opportunity to remark here either. "If he's not in the doctor's lounge, check the dressing room. He's probably sweet-talking someone there." Dryly thanking the grumbler, Ella went out into the corridor. The nurses in traumatology, accustomed to different patient relatives' tears and hysterics, looked at the visitor with irritation and fatigue. But one of them, who carried herself like a supervisor, answered thoroughly, "Dr. Miller is currently in the head doctor's office down that end of the corridor, second to last door. You can wait there or sit on the bench here near the doctor's lounge." Ella waited for the doctor, and he, upon learning that she was Ann Davis's daughter, invited her in. Showing an X-ray on the screen, Dr. Miller explained, "If I can put it this way, your mother's fracture was a fortunate one. Generally, there are 2 treatment options." He began to explain the nuances of each, then asked, "Which option have you decided on?" Eleanor looked the doctor in the eye but didn't answer, instead asking a counter-question. "Tell me, Dr. Miller, for example, if a close relative of yours had a fracture like my mother's, what would you recommend?" Smiling, the doctor replied briefly, "Osteosynthesis. In a very similar case with my aunt, our head doctor performed a similar operation. She's been active again for a year now, even works in her garden. So I can't keep up with her." The woman clarified all the details of the upcoming operation, wrote down what else needed to be brought, and, saying goodbye to the doctor, left the office. Ella had to inform her mother that the operation was scheduled for the next day, and, composing herself, she presented it as lightly as possible, trying not to alarm her. "I'll come by tomorrow. I'll meet you after the operation. Everything will be fine. Don't worry." "Ella, what about your work? Your boss will probably be angry?" "Don't you worry about that. I'll get all the work done and won't let either you or the boss down." With the operation, the long journey for Ann Davis to be able to walk again had only just begun. For 2 weeks, Ella visited her mother almost daily to feed her and take care of her. The woman tried to object and repeatedly stated, "Ella, you need to take care of yourself. Don't come to me so often. They feed me quite well here, and I don't have much appetite anyway. How could I when I'm not using any energy?" However, Ann Davis couldn't convince her daughter. When the day of discharge arrived, Eleanor went to see the doctor for recommendations. Dr. Miller was cautious and warned, "Your mother is a very energetic lady, but I've expressed my point of view, and I'll repeat it to you. I wouldn't be overly optimistic if I were you. But there's no need to despair either. Although she cannot fully bear weight on the injured limb, crutches will be Ann Davis's best friends for at least the next month. And she needs to be careful after that too. Moving is necessary, of course, but carefully. Preventive treatment is indicated to prevent bed sores. In 6 weeks, I'll expect to see her for a control X-ray to check bone fusion. That seems to be everything. Eleanor clarified, maybe Mother should take some vitamins? Dr. Miller shrugged. In principle, yes, but generally, the rehabilitation plan should be explained to you at the local clinic. Eleanor called a special taxi for people with limited mobility, and after heroically navigating the access roads, Ann Davis finally arrived at her apartment. A new problem arose for Ella. Her mother's physical condition left much to be desired, and even a simple trip to the bathroom or kitchen could result in a new injury. At first, Eleanor came to Ann Davis twice a day, and by the time the New Year holidays approached, she was exhausted. Traffic jams took up so much time that only a few miserable hours were left for sleep. Ella turned to her husband. Andy, why don't we have Mother stay with us for a while? At least I won't have to rush between apartments. The man's face darkened, and after a heavy pause he replied, Ella, I think highly of your mother. Ann Davis is a wonderful woman. But I'm sorry, I'll be frank. We simply don't have anywhere to put her here. As you know yourself, we have a studio. The room is large, but it's just one. When I tried to persuade you to take out a mortgage, I didn't get any understanding. Both you and your mother were against it. Andy, well, couldn't we put up a screen? It would be like 2 rooms. Listen, Ann Davis would be uncomfortable first and foremost. I play games loudly. I listen to music late into the night. Besides, ask her yourself, will she agree to move? I'm 100% sure she'll say no. Your mother is very tactful and wise and understands that the further away she lives, the better her relationship with her son-in-law. Andrew was right. Ann Davis, as soon as she heard the idea of moving, snorted indignantly. There can't even be a discussion. Home is where the heart is. I won't go to your place, especially since it's inconvenient to be sick there. Ella submitted to her mother's will, and she didn't want to argue with her husband either. She continued to waste time in traffic and had to give up her lawyer position. With her boss's permission, Eleanor transferred to part-time and was very glad that her manager had met her halfway. She prepared contracts during her visits, trained her successor, and performed duties that didn't require constant presence in the office. However, rehabilitation cost much more money than the woman could have imagined. Sometimes she shared her indignation with her husband about pharmacies changing prices and trying to sell the most expensive medicine, and then Andrew grumbled, Listen, Ella, surely your mother should be provided with free medication? The woman tried not to answer. The family budget didn't suffer, and she hadn't asked her husband for money in the almost 6 months since the news of her mother's troubles. Ella generally tried to manage on her own, without involving Andrew. The weather changed, but Eleanor's schedule, by established tradition, remained almost unchanged. In the morning, she prepared breakfast for her husband, and if she had time, prepared something for lunch and dinner. Then, packing some of the breakfast in a container, she rushed to her mother's, stopping at the store and pharmacies along the way. Care, maintaining her mood, and helping her move around took up a lot of time. Then Ella would stop by the office and rush home by evening. In case of emergencies, the key to her mother's apartment was with the neighbor, the same Zena who helped wait for the ambulance. She sometimes visited to watch television and gossip together, so Ann Davis couldn't be called abandoned. But Ella desperately wanted to get her mother back on her feet quickly, and not just because she had to spend a lot of time on daily commutes between distant districts. It was simply because her mother was the closest person to her. She had, in essence, given Eleanor life twice, the first time on her birthday 38 years ago, but more importantly, later, when a terrible tragedy struck Ella like an avalanche. It was her mother who was there during those dark days, helping her move when her legs almost gave out from nervous strain, forcing her to drink and eat. Abandoning her job, her mother sold her apartment in her hometown and moved her 2,000 kilometers away, far from a place where everything reminded her of her inhuman grief. It was Ann Davis who made her get a job where it was almost impossible to be alone with sad thoughts, where she had to look stylish and put together. Ella didn't consider her help to her mother a sacrifice and, despite her fatigue, tried to surround her husband with care as well, especially since their 10th wedding anniversary was approaching, and the woman wanted to arrange a touching congratulation and a pleasant surprise for her patient Andrew. She planned the menu in advance, found a confectionery that took custom orders, and arranged for an unusual cake for her husband, who adored sweets. The holiday was approaching, but shortly before it, Andrew warned during breakfast, "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I need the car for a few days. I have to go to another region, to a branch office. It seems the manager there is messing with the reports. Profits have dropped, although everything is fine in other departments. I'll try to be quick, but planes probably don't fly there, and I don't want to take the train. Can you manage without the car?" Although Eleanor had also planned on using the car, she didn't argue. After all, her husband really needed it more. She smiled. "Of course I can manage." Andrew politely thanked her for breakfast and promised, "Don't worry, we'll buy you a car too. Once things at work normalize a bit, you can choose the model." Running out of the house, he kissed his wife on the cheek, winked, and said, "Don't worry. I remember about the anniversary. I'll try to be back by Friday evening." Taking advantage of her husband's absence, Eleanor moved in with her mother for a while to save time on travel. During these few days, she managed to do a thorough cleaning, and the apartment became fresh, like spring. Only on the eve of the holiday did Ella have to return home to bring a urgently needed diploma to the office. However, this was convenient because she also needed to clean up the house and prepare Andrew's favorite salads. In the morning, the woman, taking the treats she had set aside in advance, rushed to her mother's again. As usual, she gave her a massage, helped her walk around the room, and, after waiting for the elevator to be repaired, finally took her mother outside so she could enjoy the good weather and the feeling of life returning. After a short walk, Ann Davis and Ella had lunch, and the daughter began to apologize. "Mother, I'm sorry I'm leaving a bit earlier today. I want to arrange a surprise for Andy. If you get tired of watching TV, the keys and phone are charged. If you need anything, call." "Okay, run along, Ella. Happy holiday to you and Andrew. Imagine, you've been together for 10 years already." Kissing her mother, Eleanor hurried along her pre-planned route. Spring, which had long since taken hold, offered gentle warmth, and the scent of lilac set a romantic mood. Contrary to the superstition about marrying in May, she hadn't had to suffer in her second marriage. On the contrary, Andrew was a quiet harbor for her. There were no stormy passions, but there was mutual affection and respect. Eleanor valued her husband for not prying into her soul, not tormenting her with jealousy, not demanding an heir. Even when he declared his serious intentions, Ella had told him directly that children were not in her plans. This didn't frighten the man. A few years later, Andrew asked if she had changed her mind. But upon hearing a categorical no, he didn't ask for the reasons and never brought up the subject again. He was a good partner, and of course, she loved him in her own way, with all the strength her wounded heart was capable of. Following the list, Ella bought drinks, got the squid Andrew loved, and other small things, a baguette, salad, fruit. Gradually, she accumulated 2 bulky bags, which she had thoughtfully brought with her. Hanging them on her shoulders, she ran into the confectionery for the cake. Now she could go home. Approaching the building entrance, Eleanor looked hopefully at the parking spot and sighed with relief. The car wasn't there. That meant she would have time to set the table, hang the balloons, and get dressed before her husband returned. Praising herself for the convenient bags, which left one hand free, the woman hurriedly opened the door and found herself in their family nest. Placing the cake box on the bench, Ella suddenly froze in surprise. A strange sound from the kitchen rudely intruded on the usual hum of the house. Strange. There were no unfamiliar shoes or belongings, but she distinctly heard the clinking of dishes, as if someone was moving a plate or a mug. Andrew and Eleanor didn't keep pets. They wanted a dog, but the misfortune with her mother had altered that plan. Perhaps it would have been smarter to go out onto the landing, close the door, and call her husband. But from exhaustion, Eleanor didn't act as safety dictated. Automatically slipping off her sneakers and with the bag still on her shoulders, she entered the kitchen and almost collapsed in surprise. A boy of about 6 sat on a chair with one leg tucked under him. The unknown guest was completely absorbed in eating. On the table in front of him was Andrew's huge mug, water, and a deep plate of the salad Ella had prepared the night before. A spoon indicated that the dish had already been sampled. The child was appetizingly biting into a sausage, and the woman, flooded with memories, felt a pang in her heart. It was too painful to act rationally. For a few seconds, Ella thought she was hallucinating from overwork. However, the vision was too realistic. The sound, the image, and even the aroma of the sausage. The absorbed boy only looked up from his food after Eleanor, hoarse from nervous shock, attracted his attention with a question. "Hey, hello, who are you, and what are you doing here?" The boy jumped up from the chair, still holding the sausage, and reported, "My name is Mikey Johnson. Uncle Andy brought me here and told me to wait for him. He said I could eat whatever I wanted, so I'm eating. The sausage is tasty, but very salty." It didn't even occur to Eleanor that the person the boy called Uncle Andy wasn't her husband, Andrew. Such an incredible coincidence, like in a movie where the hero doesn't realize he's opened a stranger's apartment, couldn't happen. Eleanor could vouch that their apartment design was unique. Of course, there must be a logical explanation for the situation, the woman thought. She herself had married Andrew in the spring, and the surname Johnson meant nothing to her. Her husband was an only child, but as far as Ella knew, he had cousins. Only they hadn't been invited to the modest wedding, and she didn't know them. So, perhaps Mikey Johnson was the child of one of her husband's cousins. But why had he brought the boy to their place without warning? Thrown off balance, Eleanor couldn't concentrate. Her thoughts were jumbled, and she hadn't managed to come up with a plausible explanation before Andrew called. Coming out of her stupor, Ella took off the bags and answered the call. The man spoke quickly, not letting his wife get a word in. "Darling, we just missed each other. I just left Ann Davis's apartment and will be home in literally 20 minutes to explain everything. Set the table for now." The confused woman felt a little better and replied briefly, "Okay." She felt Mikey's gaze very clearly on her but couldn't bring herself to look him in the eye. The woman brought new slippers from the hallway, bought for the summer, and offered, "Mikey, it's hot indoors in sneakers. Here, take these slippers, put them on. It'll be more comfortable." The child obeyed silently. To diffuse the situation and occupy the boy but also avoid conversation, Ella asked, "Mikey, can you inflate balloons?" The boy nodded. The woman quickly went to the room, brought the package, opened it, rinsed the tips Mikey would inflate through, and handed them to him, asking, "Don't inflate them too much. When you get tired, rest, and I'll help tie them. Agreed?" The child nodded busily and without shyness asked, "And is your name Ella?" Ella shrugged. "My name can be changed in different ways. Ella, Lena, or Lenotchka." Mikey's eyes widened in surprise. "But those are girls' names. Are you a man or something?" Eleanor chuckled. "No, I'm not a man. It's just a versatile name, like Alex or Val." Silence fell in the kitchen. The boy, lost in thought, occupied himself with the balloons. Ella, keeping an eye on her guest, began unpacking the bags, preparing and setting the table. She put the cake in the refrigerator and, interrupting herself to tie balloons, felt not irritation, but a sharp pain. She wasn't angry with her husband, but various thoughts were swirling in her head. The woman felt the guest's curious gaze but didn't dare to look him in the eye. So they watched each other, but barely spoke. Busy with chores, Eleanor didn't notice Andrew enter the kitchen with a huge bouquet of roses and a bulky bag. He put the load on the floor and handed his wife the flowers. "Ella, congratulations to you and me on our holiday. I see you've already met Mikey, become friends. Just wonderful. Well then, let's celebrate." The boy, noticeably cheered up, said shyly, "Congratulations." And when everyone sat down at the table, he boasted loudly, "Uncle Andy, I inflated the balloons myself, and Ella helped me tie them. We prepared a good surprise for you." The adult man mumbled something indistinct in response to the guest's chatter, praising Mikey and his wife, who hadn't even touched her food. There was tension in the apartment, and Andrew set about correcting the situation. He quietly turned on music and began enthusiastically praising his wife's dishes. Then he proposed a toast to Ella's beauty and charm, took a small box from his pocket, handed it to her, and said, "Congratulations. I hope you like it." The woman, lost in thought, only now remembered her own gift. Leaving the somber company for a moment, Eleanor, clutching the unopened box in her hand, took out the hidden present. Returning to the table, she handed her husband the package and limited herself to a curt phrase, "Happy 10th anniversary." Andrew, hastily tearing open the paper, began loudly admiring the tin flask and showing the gift to Mikey. The woman felt uncomfortable and again sank into thought. This was not at all how she had imagined the celebration. She wanted a surprise, but her husband had managed not just to surprise her, but to completely unbalance her. "Surprises again!" Ella coughed violently, choking on water when she heard the question. "Ella, Mikey will stay with us for a couple of weeks, okay?" Eleanor was silent, not knowing what to say. Andrew tried to justify himself. "I stopped by Ann Davis's to pick you up. I wanted to explain everything on the way home, but I didn't have time, and this is the surprise. I'm sorry I didn't warn you, but I was sure I'd find you at Mother's and warn you about the guest on the way." Andrew's monologue ended in silence. Eleanor moved food around on her plate with a fork without looking up. He, flustered, also didn't know what else to say. With childish spontaneity, Mikey broke the silence, asking loudly, "Aunt Ella, thank you. I've already eaten. Can I try the cake now?" He showed his empty plate. With a stony face, Eleanor stood up and went to the refrigerator. She wanted to scream, to sob, and to break the dishes, stained, like her faith in her husband's honesty. She understood that it wouldn't get easier. The most likely explanation for the boy's appearance seemed to her to be infidelity. With her whole being, Ella now hated the man she had loved for 10 years as much as she was capable of. Andrew, who knew his wife well, guessed from her jerky movements that in a little while she would say everything on her mind, and decided to take the boy away from the table to the relaxation area. "Mikey, let's go. I'll turn on the game console for you. My games are mostly complicated, but we'll find something or I'll put on cartoons." "And will there be cake to eat?" the boy asked interestedly. "Of course, you can have anything there." Mikey's eyes sparkled. He trustingly followed his host to the soft seating area. Eleanor, who had heard the conversation, cut a large piece of cake, put it on a plate, turned on the kettle, and watched it boil. The click brought her out of her reverie. Brewing tea, the woman placed a cup, a sugar bowl, and the plate with cake on a tray, and then carried it to the table near the game area. Andrew was showing Mikey his game collection, but the boy, clearly well-behaved, tore himself away and thanked her. "Thank you very much." The woman nodded and, turning abruptly, left. When Andrew came into the kitchen, he found a strange scene. Eleanor was sitting on the floor, holding dirty children's sneakers in her hands, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. The man tried to joke, "Hey, Ella, what's wrong? So what if a child walked in with dirty shoes? We'll turn on the robot vacuum cleaner now. It's no big deal. Is it worth getting upset over dust? Especially today as a holiday." Eleanor looked at her husband in a way that made him uncomfortable and said quietly, "Andy, I think I've told you more than once that I don't want to spend a lot of time with children. It's beyond my strength. Perhaps there were compelling circumstances for your actions, and you can be understood. Only I'm sorry I have no desire to deal with the details. Now I'm going to Mother's and I need some time." Andrew couldn't understand the reason for such a decision, but he saw that Ella was on the verge of a breakdown. So he suggested, "Ella, I really am at fault for not warning you, but I can explain everything. I think when you listen you'll understand that I couldn't have done otherwise. I'll wait until you're ready to talk." The woman carefully put down the sneakers, wiped away her tears, and walked towards the door as if she hadn't heard her husband. Andrew took her hand and asked, "Ella, wait. I'll call a taxi to Ann Davis's house so I don't have to worry about you." Ella nodded and soon was riding in a taxi, fidgeting with her purse strap. The road was clear, and the journey took less time. As soon as the woman opened the door, she heard, "Zena, come in, dear. I'm not feeling very well." Eleanor closed the door and, taking off her shoes, went into her mother's bedroom. Ann Davis was startled. "Ella, why are you back? Didn't Andrew come? By my calculations, your anniversary should be in full swing. And you're here. Daughter, what happened?" Eleanor went to the bed, sat on the floor, and leaning her head against Ann Davis's hand, told her everything that had happened since she returned home. Finishing her story, Ella speculated, "Mother, I'm almost certain that Mikey is Andrew's illegitimate son. The boy is about 6 years old, which means my husband was cheating and even had the audacity to present me with proof of his infidelity on our anniversary." Ann Davis tried to calm her daughter. "I'm sure Andrew can explain everything. I feel that he loves you. Believe my experience, it's unlikely he would risk your relationship and cheat." However, Ella cried without stopping. The woman stroked her adult, but defenseless, sobbing daughter, but said no more words because they were all powerless. Finally, when the tears dried up, Eleanor silently got up and went to wash her swollen face. The woman felt devastated. Returning to her mother, Ella confessed, "I'm very tired. Do you mind if I lie down?" Ann Davis didn't object. She understood that her unhappy daughter needed to rest. "Of course, Ella, but let's take some sedative, at least valerian drops. It's good for both of us." Ella did as she was asked and went to sleep. The nervous tension was so strong that the woman passed out and woke up at 10 in the morning. Jumping up, Ella rushed to the kitchen, where she found her mother stirring pancake batter. "Good morning, daughter. You're just in time. We'll have breakfast now." Working together, the women made pancakes and, as if by agreement, didn't say a word about yesterday. When Ella was washing the dishes, Ann Davis asked, "Daughter, please go to the theater with Zena. She has 2 tickets for a good play, excellent seats. Her niece gave them to her. They were supposed to go together, but she got sick, and other relatives can't accompany her. The ticket will go to waste. It's a shame." Ella shook her head. "Mother, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm not in the mood." However, if Ann Davis had something in mind, she knew how to insist. "That's exactly why you should go, because you're not in the mood. Art is excellent at changing your thoughts and emotions. Please, daughter, not for the sake of the ticket, but for my sake." Although Eleanor had to obey, she categorically refused the offer to stop by the hairdresser. Waiting until Zena had taken Ella away, Ann Davis called her son-in-law and said in a commanding tone, "Andrew, Ella won't be back for about 3 hours. Come over, we need to talk." The man didn't resist but warned, "Ann Davis, I will definitely come, but I have no one to leave Mikey with. I could find a nanny, but I wouldn't trust the boy to just anyone, so I can only come with him. Do you mind?" The woman sighed. "I don't mind." "Excellent. Then I'll be at your place with Mikey in half an hour." 30 minutes later, Ann Davis, carefully walking to the door with the help of her walker, let Andrew and Mikey in. The man introduced the child, and the boy politely greeted her. The hostess tried not to show her anxiety and hospitably invited Mikey into the kitchen. "Come in. There's television and pastries there. Cocoa or tea?" The child announced that coffee was the tastiest thing for him, but he couldn't drink it often, and he would have tea because he was too old for cocoa. Ann Davis almost laughed in surprise, but she controlled her emotions and, turning to Andrew, asked, "Can I treat Mikey to chicory then? It's almost like coffee." The boy was delighted. "I want to try this chicory. Uncle Andy, can I?" Andrew agreed, and when the hostess had finished with the treat, the man handed the boy his phone and explained, "I need to talk to Ann Davis. You stay here, eat, play, maybe watch some videos, okay?" "Of course, Uncle Andy. I can be without supervision, don't worry." Watching this, Ann Davis could barely hold back tears, and, hiding her emotions, she quietly walked towards the room she old-fashionedly called the living room. Andrew followed, eager to know what they wanted to talk to him about. The woman settled in an armchair, and the man sat on the sofa. The hostess watched her son-in-law intently, but he couldn't stand it and asked, "Ann Davis, explain why Eleanor reacted so inappropriately to Mikey's appearance. I admit it's my fault for not warning her, but we are adults. Instead of talking, she ran away to you. Is that normal?" The woman didn't interrupt, but she wasn't in a hurry to answer, instead asking a counter-question. "Before we start a difficult conversation to try and help my daughter save her family, I need to be sure it's worthwhile. Tell me honestly, is Mikey your illegitimate son?" The man's indignation knew no bounds. "No, of course not. I never even thought of cheating on Ella. I love and respect her very much. My attitude towards children is starting to scare me. Mikey ended up with us because of a desperate situation. Eleanor didn't even try to get along with him, although, as you noticed, he's a well-behaved, intelligent, charming boy." Andrew's answer calmed the woman, and taking a deep breath, she decided to tell the truth. "Well, secrets come to light. As her husband, you have the right to know why my daughter avoids children. I think I have the right to tell her story, which was first a fairy tale, and then turned into a nightmare that ruined her life. Ella grew up a wonderful, intelligent girl, a joy to me and my husband. We had no problem getting her into the best gymnasium. Our means and positions allowed Ella to be one of the golden youth. The gymnasium had a strong faculty. Grades weren't bought. Children were skillfully engaged, and our Ella was one of the best. She was even made a mentor for her desk neighbor, Greg. The boy was from a very good, influential family. It was no joke. His father was the regional prosecutor. His mother held a high position under him. In short, they lived better than us, but they didn't hinder the friendship between their son and Ella. They welcomed her and communicated with us kindly. When Ella was in 10th grade, her father died suddenly. A blood clot detached. It was Greg's family who supported us after the loss. I am still grateful, because I was in such a state that I almost followed my husband. So, of course, I didn't object when Ella decided to marry Greg. So what if she was just over 18? It was obvious that true feelings shouldn't be hindered. Greg's parents also didn't object and were happy that my daughter became part of their family. A year after the wedding, Ella and Greg had twins, 2 boys, Nick and Pete. They grew up healthy, cheerful, strong, and brought us joy. Ella couldn't get enough of them. "You know, Andy," she used to say that when she was walking, pushing the stroller, her heart felt like it would jump out with happiness. Of course, I helped when I could. Her mother-in-law offered a nanny, but my daughter refused. She managed on her own. God knows what it cost her, but she didn't drop out of university and even managed without taking a leave of absence. And her father-in-law got her a prestigious job in a position with standard hours and benefits. He had the opportunity, and there was no shame in providing patronage. Ella was very intelligent. Nick and Pete were 6 years old when my daughter got pregnant again. Greg met the news happily, and why be sad? Their relationship was wonderful, as far as I know, not a single argument, as if 2 halves had united. I know many people were envious. Some women tried to start a romance with Greg, but he didn't need anyone but my Ella. Everything was so perfect that it never crossed my mind that everything would collapse overnight due to a terrible tragedy. Ella had to go to the doctor, and Greg volunteered to pick up the boys from kindergarten himself. By a ridiculous coincidence, his car broke down, and he decided to walk the children home through the park. The weather was wonderful, and although the rides weren't working, there was a pizzeria at the exit where the boys wanted to go. On the way, Greg met a friend, and while he was talking, the children, getting playful, ran out onto the lake. The March ice turned out to be treacherously thin. My grandsons, as witnesses later recounted, didn't even have time to cry out. They went under the water instantly. Greg and his friend rushed to the water, but the boys were only recovered by divers. Greg later tried to justify himself, repeating like a broken record that he had only been distracted for a few seconds. But what was the point? Our boys drowned. It couldn't be undone. My son-in-law was the first to tell me this bitter news because he was afraid for Eleanor, and not without reason. I went to the private clinic where I knew Ella was. My heart told me it would be better if doctors were near when grief overwhelmed my daughter. Seeing me, Ella probably understood everything from my face. After the news, she had hysterics. It was impossible to calm her down, even with a large dose of medication. She didn't make it home that evening. She ended up in the hospital with a nervous breakdown. From the stress over her sons, my daughter couldn't save the baby developing under her heart. The doctors didn't yet consider it a child, but she had already lost it. At Nick and Pete's funeral, Ella stood like a stone statue, without tears, pale as death. The emptiness in her eyes was especially terrifying. Greg suffered no less. His hair turned gray at 25. He tried to take Ella's hand, but she recoiled from him as if he were a leper. She never again crossed the threshold of the apartment where she had lived with her husband and sons. Countless times Greg tried to talk to her, but it didn't work. Ella simply erased her husband. Greg's mother came to us, understanding that her daughter didn't want to see her husband. She knelt and begged for her son's forgiveness, saying he wasn't himself, sharing her fear that he was on the verge. But Eleanor didn't react at all. She could never forgive her husband for the death of their sons. Greg couldn't forgive himself either, turning into a pale shadow of his former self. Ella predictably quit her job, supposedly voluntarily, but everyone understood that she couldn't be in the public eye. Moreover, an unexpected problem arose. My daughter would approach hysterics if she went outside and saw a child. She changed her route, but it was impossible to avoid meeting children. Once, we were in the elevator with a neighbor and her little girl. Everything seemed normal, but I got nervous. After they got out, I looked at my daughter and saw blood trickling down her chin. She had bitten her lip so hard trying to suppress hysterics. After that incident, my daughter stayed home for almost a month. I even called the best doctor to the house. There were changes, but they weren't fast or positive. After apathy, my daughter became aggressive, as if possessed, and medication didn't help for long. Ella took pills, fell into indifference for a few hours, and then agonizingly pondered something, pacing the room. One day I saw her searching for poisons online and was seriously frightened. I realized my daughter had decided to deal with the unwitting culprit. I tried to stay by her side constantly, watching so she wouldn't do anything irreparable. Once, Ella went out in the morning while I was asleep. Friends later told me that she ambushed Greg outside his work and lunged at him with her fists, shouting, "Why are you alive and our sons aren't?" I don't know. Maybe they exaggerated, but 4 strong men barely managed to pull her away from a bewildered Greg. He didn't even resist. When I came to pick her up, my daughter was sitting in the utility room smelling of valerian and other medicines, barely reacting. They said an ambulance had come and sedated her. Among friends and neighbors, of course, the only talk was about the accident and about Eleanor going mad with grief. One day, Greg's father called me and strongly asked me and my daughter to leave the city. You don't refuse people like that. Besides, I myself was thinking about how to hide my daughter from memories, from sympathetic and curious glances. I quit my job, sold the apartment. Again, thanks to my son-in-law's parents. It was done quickly and at a reasonable price. Ella and Greg were divorced in absentia, again thanks to his relatives. My daughter didn't even have to go anywhere. In the end, we moved to this city, far away from everything. Well, and then you know the rest, Andrew. You met her, and my daughter started coming back to life. Don't think that Ella hates children. It's just that it still hurts her. She even refuses the possibility of becoming a mother again because of the fear of repeating the nightmare she went through. Ann Davis fell silent. Telling the terrible story had emotionally exhausted the woman. Andrew noticed how pale her face had become and hurried to the kitchen for water. Mikey was engrossed in playing on the phone, and the man, stroking his head, filled a glass and returned to the living room. I'm sorry I made you remember all that. The woman, after drinking the water, said bitterly, Ah, Andrew, if only it were possible to forget. Perhaps I should have told you about Ella's past earlier. I just couldn't bring myself to tell it out loud. My daughter, as I understand, still can't talk about it either. The man looked at the woman in bewilderment and confessed, Honestly, I couldn't even imagine that such a tragedy could be behind Ella's reluctance to become a mother. I thought she didn't want to ruin her figure. It's hard to even imagine what she must have felt when she saw Mikey in the kitchen. And I managed to pull off such a surprise, right on our anniversary. How can I ask Ella for forgiveness now so she understands? I really had nowhere else to take Mikey, and for several reasons. The boy needs to be sheltered for a week or two in a safe place where his parents' enemies wouldn't even think to look. It all happened almost by chance. I went to the branch office and ran into an old friend on the street whom I hadn't seen since the army. Ollie is more than a friend to me. Thanks to him, I survived in the army. But that's a long story. Life separated us in civilian life and we lost contact. I tried to find him on social media. Maybe I should have been more persistent. Well, I got caught up building my career. Anyway, we hadn't seen each other for about 15 years. And here I meet Ollie in a city that's foreign to both of us. He'd changed, of course, but I recognized him right away. He almost walked past, but I stopped him. It turned out Victor had come to resolve problems for his sister and her husband. They got involved in a lawsuit with some unreasonable people who were used to doing business criminally. Ollie was most worried about Mikey, his nephew. He explained to his sister that just in case the child needed to be hidden, because the gangsters could use him to influence the decision. But they couldn't think of a safe place. And then, I appeared out of nowhere. The idea of taking Mikey away seemed perfect. There were no threads that could lead the gangsters to his trail. It's also good that the boy has a strong character. He's growing into a man. His parents and Ollie said he needed to stay with me for a bit, and he accepted it calmly. I picked him up like in a detective story, making sure not to be caught on camera. I agreed with Ollie to get in touch in a week, and he was supposed to call me himself when the matter was resolved. Mikey, of course, is a perfect boy. He settled into the unfamiliar place easily and even went to sleep on his own after brushing his teeth. All that's left is to wait for Ollie's call. It's easy for me to be with Mikey, but on Monday I have to go to work. I doubt I can take him with me. Now I don't know what to do. Andrew fell silent, and then Eleanor's voice unexpectedly sounded. It's nothing special. You'll go to work as usual, and I'll stay with Mikey. Just leave me the car so I don't have to drag the boy around on public transport. It turned out, contrary to Ann Davis's calculations, her daughter had already returned from the theater, and it seemed had heard part of her husband's story. To her mother's anticipating question, Ella explained, I couldn't watch the play. I went to the restroom, washed my face, and realized I couldn't go back and stare at the stage. I typed a message to Zena apologizing and came here. It turns out I came back at the right time. Perhaps I needed to hear Mikey's story from an outsider's perspective because, Andy, forgive me, I suspected you of cheating. I doubt I would have believed you if you had told me yesterday. Today I can look at it more rationally. Mother, do you mind if I visit you with Mikey? The woman, trying not to scare away the changes, spoke cautiously. Of course, come visit. Ann Davis wanted to add something, but her eyes stung, and she decided to change the subject. Ella, Andrew, aren't you hungry? I could eat something right now. Let's go to the kitchen. Besides, we need to see how Mikey is doing. If he's bored, I completely forgot about hospitality. The boy, seeing Eleanor, didn't forget to greet her, and the woman's voice trembled slightly as she replied. Andrew, who understood the reason for his wife's behavior, was now amazed by her resilience. Having gone through such an ordeal, she had endured and never appealed to his pity or sympathy. Eleanor gently but persistently declined Ann Davis's attempts to feed everyone. Thank you, Mother, for everything, but we should probably go home. I'll stop by tomorrow closer to lunchtime. Andrew, understanding that he had been forgiven, was very happy and warmly said goodbye to Ann Davis, promising, We'll all visit you together tomorrow. If you're feeling up to it and the weather is warm, we can go out into nature. How does that sound to you? Wonderful, Andrew. Let's not plan too far ahead. After saying goodbye to the hostess, Ella, Andrew, and Mikey set off for the other end of the city. The man got behind the wheel and saw in the mirror how carefully his wife buckled the boy in. It was obvious that for Eleanor, this was a natural, automatic gesture. She was clearly a tender, caring mother. She loved her children very much, and after the tragedy had suffered in a way you wouldn't wish on an enemy. Carefully parking the car, the man carried the sleeping Mikey to the apartment in his arms. Eleanor smoothed the sheet, gently took off the boy's shoes and covered him with a blanket. Watching his wife, Andrew felt incredible tenderness. His beloved woman had revealed an unfamiliar side of herself. He understood that he had made the right choice. Later, they closed the kitchen door and drank tea with cake and, as if there had been no wall of misunderstanding, planned Sunday with jokes and kisses. The man finally dared to bring up the unpleasant topic and confessed, "Ella, I'm an idiot. I almost ruined everything with my actions, and I want to say a huge thank you for your understanding." His wife smiled. "Well, honestly, I also overreacted, so I suggest we forget about it. Let's move on." The weekend was fun, even better than expected. They even managed to get Ann Davis out for a walk, and she was less happy about the day itself than about her daughter's happy eyes. Ella gladly answered Mikey's questions, constantly watching to make sure he wasn't in danger. Neither her mother nor her husband dared to make any remarks. Mikey seemed not to notice the care. By agreement with Eleanor, he called her by her first name, not using aunt, and looked content. After dropping Ann Davis off at home after their outing, the trio stayed longer because there was no chance of leaving without being fed. However, no one objected. Late in the evening, as Ella was putting Mikey to bed, the boy quietly asked, "Do you think my parents are okay? Will I see them soon?" Trying to keep her voice steady, Eleanor replied, "Of course they are okay. They will finish all their business very soon, and you will meet." The calmed boy fell asleep. Ella, afraid of waking him, beckoned her husband to the kitchen and began asking about the trouble Mikey's parents were in. "Ella, honestly, I don't know the details. Ollie briefly outlined it, but I understood that some real thugs were after his sister and her husband." The woman began to ask clarifying questions, unexpected ones. "Are these gangsters from the city you went to, or are they from somewhere else? Did he mention any nicknames?" Andrew told her everything he knew, but it wasn't enough information for Ella, and she asked, "Can you contact Ollie urgently? I need a few clarifications to try and help Mikey's parents. Of course, he's fine and comfortable with us, but a mother and son shouldn't be separated for long." From Eleanor's voice, it was impossible to tell how deeply she was taking the situation to heart, but now, knowing her past, Andrew understood how difficult it was for her. "Actually, Ollie gave me a password for a chat in case of an emergency, where messages disappear. I think I can try to contact him." The man opened the website, entered the details he had memorized, and a few minutes later exclaimed, "It worked! Ollie greeted me." Ella advised, "Andy, ask a question whose answer will confirm it's really your friend, and if you have the slightest doubt, immediately close the site and take out the SIM card." Alarmed by his wife's suspicions, Andrew quickly typed a few phrases and waited for a response. Reading the message, he breathed a sigh of relief. "Everything's good. It's definitely Ollie," he replied with our code phrase. Eleanor nodded and asked, "Excellent. Write to Victor that your wife will be messaging him now and give me the phone. I'll find out everything I need from your friend myself." "I'm not surprised by anything anymore," Andrew said, handing her the phone. She messaged for quite a while, then grabbed a pen, quickly wrote down a number on a bread wrapper, tore off the edge, squeezed it in her hand, and handed the phone back to her husband. "That's it. I'm going to the bathroom. I need to make a call. Write to Ollie to log into the messenger in an hour. Then I hope I can report something concrete." Eleanor left and went to the bathroom, which had the best soundproofing. Taking deep breaths, she dialed the number of her former father-in-law, which she had memorized. The phone was unavailable. Ella gathered her willpower and dialed her former husband's number. Soon his voice answered, "Hello, don't be silent." Eleanor's voice was hoarse with emotion. "Greg, hello, it's Ella. I need your help. More precisely, your father can resolve the situation, but I can't reach him." The man's demanding tone softened. "Ella, it's good to hear from you. My father is abroad, but if you tell me what the problem is, I'll try to help. I'm at the regional prosecutor's office now, so all my connections are at your service." "Thank you," the woman replied, told him everything she had learned, and dictated the number she had written down. "Okay, Ella, I understand everything. It's not the simplest matter, but it's solvable. I think there's an influential force for every thug. I'll try to help. Warn your friend that I'll call tomorrow or the day after from my phone. He can feel free to answer. Thank you, Greg. Without waiting for a reply, Eleanor ended the conversation, which had been difficult, and washed her face with ice water, hoping to regain her composure. Even during the conversation, she had wanted to apologize, but couldn't. The resentment towards the man's carelessness, which had caused her to lose her children, burned in her heart. At the same time, Ella understood that without the intervention of her former husband, who had connections, Mikey's family was doomed, and she wanted to protect the boy. The woman sat in the bathroom for some time, regulating her heartbeat with breathing exercises. Seeing that almost an hour had passed, she returned to the kitchen to Andrew and told him what Greg had said. The man messaged his friend the information and hugged Ella tightly. He saw how drawn his beloved looked and didn't know how to help. He wanted to protect her from hardship, but instead, Ella had to turn to the person who had almost destroyed her life. The conversation had agitated the woman. She freed herself from his embrace and automatically began clearing the table, not noticing that she was throwing away food. Finally, the man took her hand and suggested, "Stop rushing around. It's been a difficult day. You need to rest." Even listening to her sleeping husband's peaceful breathing, Ella couldn't calm down. Images of the little boys appeared before her eyes. Here are Nick and Pete smiling toothless smiles, then going to kindergarten for the first time and waving to her, giving her cards. Here, conspiring instead of falling asleep, they applaud loudly when she sings a lullaby. So many pleasant moments stored in memory, so brutally erased by an accident. How many times she had warned her sons not to take risks. They hadn't listened. However, what was the point of being angry now? Nick and Pete were gone, and their father was now the only hope that Mikey would soon be hugged by his mother. Let Greg at least be able to help this unfamiliar woman. Mikey stirred and mumbled something, and Eleanor, slipping out from under her husband's arm, hurried to the boy. She carefully adjusted the blanket, felt his forehead, fearing a fever, and sighed with relief. Mikey opened his eyes, and Ella, sitting on the edge of the sofa, began quietly singing a lullaby. The boy had fallen asleep long ago, but the woman remained sitting beside him, and she so wanted the child to return to his parents as soon as possible, and at the same time, she understood that she would miss being with him. When the sky lightened, Eleanor quietly went to the kitchen to make coffee and work on documents, because there was no point in going back to sleep. In these hours, perhaps somewhere far away, Mikey's fate was being decided, but Ella was powerless to influence it. She had done all she could, overcoming her resentment, and now all that remained was to wait for the result. Carefully studying the papers, the woman made notes, wrote out proposals, and, putting everything back in the folder, began quietly preparing breakfast. She decided to ask her boss for time off, so as not to tire the boy with travel. Waiting for the right time, Ella messaged her boss that she would send the documents through her husband and began thinking about how to cheer up the guest, who was upset about the separation, although he tried to be brave. When Andrew, who had showered, looked into the kitchen, Ella had everything ready. She invited her husband to the table and asked, "Andy, stop by Mr. Smith's on your way and give him the folder. I told him I wouldn't be able to come in for a few days. If he needs anything, he can email it or send it through you. In an emergency, I'll come in. But I don't want to stress Mikey. I wanted to take him to Mother's and then to a children's center. Why should he constantly play on the computer? Let him have some fun so he doesn't think about sad things. It seems he had nightmares last night." Andrew agreed with the plan, and after a quick breakfast, thanked her and began getting ready. Mikey woke up later, but Ella didn't wake him. She wanted the boy not to feel uncomfortable. The woman fed him and then suggested, "Let's go to my mother's for a little while and then somewhere to have fun." A message arrived on Ella's phone, and she smiled, seeing money credited. Andrew had made sure his wife wouldn't have financial problems. The woman smiled and asked the boy, "How about we go to an amusement park? It's not far from the city, and there's a lot there. A fun house, rope courses, a climbing wall. Do you like active fun or movies? That's also fine. I haven't seen anything on the big screen in ages." Mikey admitted shyly. Honestly, I'd prefer the amusement park. Well, then that's where we'll go. Ann Davis was very happy when her daughter came with the boy. It meant Ella had believed her husband and hadn't acted rashly. From her traumatic memories, she saw that Ella seemed to have thawed after spending time with Mikey, and she barely managed to make them leave early. Daughter, I feel great today. Go, have fun. If anything happens, I'll call, and don't worry at all. I feel like I have more energy today after yesterday's walk. Turning to the boy, Ann Davis asked, Mikey, please, have a good rest for yourself and for me. The boy nodded seriously and promised, I'll ask Ella to take pictures and send them to you. You have a smartphone, right? The woman smiled. Well done, wonderful. Exactly. That way I'll feel like I'm having fun with you. Ella, check if the phone is charged. Eleanor reassured her mother, saying she could charge the phone in the car. Soon the guests left Ann Davis, and she, left alone, began to dream that her daughter would finally decide to become a mother again. It was obvious to the woman that Ella knew how to get along with children, but she had suffered for so many years, avoiding interaction. May everything turn out well for my long-suffering girl, Ann Davis prayed aloud. Ella, carefully driving the car, took Mikey to have fun and felt the weight of voluntarily assumed responsibility pressing down on her. The boy asked to go on the rope course, and the woman agreed, although at the sight of the ropes, she wanted to grab the child and not let go. Without taking her eyes off him, Eleanor watched the boy playing and occasionally took photos, but didn't dare to send them to her mother. It seemed that if she got distracted, something would happen to the boy. The thought came to her of the despair Mikey's mother must have been in to agree to give her son to an almost stranger. Such an act could only be decided upon due to a real threat. So she, Ella, had no right to let down the woman who knew minimal information, a name, surname, age, and that she was caught up in a situation she couldn't get out of herself. However, Ella was in a better position. Irene, Mikey's mother, knew even less about the people who had taken in her son. The Monday filled with entertainment flew by unnoticed. The boy, tired from active fun, fell asleep after dinner and rested peacefully until morning. Andrew and Eleanor chatted quietly in the kitchen. The woman enthusiastically recounted how bravely Mikey had tackled the rides and showed photos. Tomorrow, after visiting Mother, I want to take our guest to museums, then to the cinema, or vice versa, whatever Mikey wants. If you can, join us. It will be fun. He's so cool and sometimes says such profound things. Today he told me that adults deliberately try to look serious so people are afraid of them and don't bother them. Can you imagine? The man agreed that there was sense in this conclusion and suggested, Ella, let's go to sleep too, like Mikey, because tomorrow, as I understand it, will be just as busy. Neither Tuesday nor Wednesday brought news from Greg or the boy's relatives. Although the child visited entertainment and educational venues, his mood deteriorated. He became more thoughtful and sad. Andrew and Ella understood that the boy was missing his parents, but they couldn't influence the situation. Only on Thursday, when Ella and Mikey were visiting Ann Davis, did the long-awaited call come. Greg informed his ex-wife that the main difficulties were behind them and warned, there are still some things to sort out, but they are minor. The main thing is, the boy is not in danger. His parents have already left for the city where you live. I told them to call when they are approaching and clarify the address. In short, I will see this matter through to the end. Eleanor sincerely thanked her ex-husband. Thank you, Greg, and forgive me for everything. The man's voice was clear when he replied to the woman who had caused him pain. Ella, you can't imagine how happy I am to hear from you, even if it's for this reason. I wish you happiness, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'm always happy to help. Eleanor said goodbye, and Ann Davis, who had overheard the conversation, couldn't believe her ears. It seemed her Ella was communicating normally with the person she had once loved and then hated. Mother, we need to go. Mikey's parents are on their way and I need to bathe him. The child understood that he would soon see his mother and father and started jumping, shouting, Hooray! Ella barely calmed him down. Ann Davis, in her joy, gave the boy her photograph and a collection of stamps he had liked as a keepsake. "Here, Mikey, you can look at the album and remember me." The child promised, "Thank you, but I won't forget you, Grandma Ann, even without the stamps." Taking advantage of the moment, Eleanor called her husband to share the good news. But it turned out he already knew. "Ella, Ollie already told me that thanks to your help, everything was resolved. I'm taking a taxi home now to prepare for the meeting." Eleanor was a little sad to part with the boy who had awakened memories of happy days with her sons, and she invited him to a toy store on the way. "You know, I want to give you something too. Choose whatever you want." The boy didn't resist, but shyly didn't spend long looking and soon took an inexpensive robot from the shelf. On the way to the checkout, Eleanor put a plane Mikey had talked about admiringly and several board games in the basket. "Oh, so much stuff," the child exclaimed. "This is a real holiday today." Eleanor agreed. "Yes, Mikey, today is a very big holiday." By the time the doorbell rang, the boy was freshly bathed and settings were laid on the table. Irene, as soon as she crossed the threshold, rushed to her son, hugging and kissing him. The boy's father handed Eleanor flowers, and Ollie hugged Andrew tightly. After Mikey took on the role of an adult and introduced his parents to the hosts, everyone sat down at the table. Irene volunteered to help Eleanor and confessed, "If it weren't for your kindness, I don't know how we would have managed. I can't express my gratitude enough. My husband and I have collected some money to compensate for the expenses and inconvenience." Ella paled. "Irene, please put the envelope away. Don't offend me. Your boy will be going to school soon. Spend the money on him. And if it's not too much trouble, send us photos of him sometimes. That would be the best thank you." An embarrassed Irene burst into tears and hugged Eleanor. When Mikey, worried about his mother and Ella's absence, looked into the kitchen, he saw the women crying and asked like an adult, "What happened? Did you get hurt? Did you cut yourselves? Did you burn yourselves?" Ella and Irene wiped away their tears in unison. His mother calmed her son. "Everything is fine, darling. Everything is just wonderful." Hugging the boy, she picked him up and twirled him around. Ella watched the happy people and felt no envy, but wished that all the troubles for this family were in the past. After the guests left, Eleanor leaned trustingly against her husband and confessed, "You know, I think I'm ready for motherhood. Mikey proved to me that children are the greatest happiness." The man didn't try to dissuade his wife. Soon, Eleanor delighted him and Ann Davis with the news of her pregnancy. Exactly on time and without complications, the woman gave birth to a daughter. The girl was named Victoria, in honor of Andrew's friend and as a symbol of victory over terrible memories.